Welcome to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in or watching us here at the podcast, we welcome you and we hope that you come back for future episodes. If you are a returning guest, viewer, listener of the podcast, we welcome you back and we hope that today's episode is one that you find enlightening, informative, and inspiring. So, before we get to the main event, let me just ask you all to click that subscribe button for the YouTube channel. It's going to be under my name, Sarfo-Mensah, but this is the Identity Talk channel where we house our podcast episodes and all other visual content. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get notifications on future episodes and new content. Thank you kindly. So I'm excited about this conversation. We're going to be talking about everything from anti-Blackness, the state of Black women, not just in academia, but just throughout the globe, and just everything that's going on in our world as we speak. So today's guest is a sister who is just fierce. She is beautiful. She's powerful. She's a mother. She's an educator, a scholar. She is a lot of things. And I am just blessed to have her in this space so we can have a real powerful dialogue today. So I don't want to spend too much time talking because I want to make sure I give space to this queen so she can share her story and everything that's going on. So without further ado, let's bring on Yaribel Mercedes onto the podcast so she can talk about her story and just what's going on in her world. So let's bring her on.
Hey, brother, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, sister?
Thank you so much for those beautiful and kind words. I appreciate them. I hear them and I feel them. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
Yes. And it is a blessing to have you here. And I'm looking forward to this next hour or so. You know how it is when we get into conversations. Sometimes,
Well,
we lose track of time, but that's African. That's how African we are,
listen, like
right?
Dr. Yaba said, we can run our mouths.
For real. We're,
That
we're
that's
not
just what it do.
we're not bounded by time constraints. That's all Eurocentric.
Come
We,
on.
we go with the soul. We go with the rhythm,
I
wherever
always
it
say
takes
that
us.
when they want to bring protocol in my job. I'm like, I'm the queen of breaking protocol. So are y'all ready?
I know that's right. So let's go ahead and get started. First question I always ask my guest is to tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into the field of education.
Man, that's a so a little bit about me aside from all the amazing things that you said about me is that I'm also a wife, a partner. I have two beautiful children, 14 and 7, that really ground me and sustain me in the work. And I see myself as a humanitarian, as someone that is striving to be the best version of herself by learning, unlearning, and really trying to, walk in this path of like my brother Rakem says, of self-actualization. I always sort of had a sense of wanting to be in education. I think it's sort of changed. I always remember as a little kid, playing with dolls. I was bossy one. And I was always the teacher, and I was always telling my dolls what they were learning, what they needed to do. So the fire was always in there. But I think initially when I came into education, if I'm honest, I came to it from a very savior stance. I grew up in the hood. I grew up in Washington Heights. We have to get out. We have to move away from this world, this sort of theme of assimilating, this sort of theme of wanting to be part of the status quo. And sort of now, what sustains me and grounds me in education is really the day to day choices that I make towards liberation. How am I showing up, in the work? How am I disrupting and fighting against white supremacy, whiteness, and oppressive policy structure systems facing, education or the state of education currently? So Yeah, I think my role in education has evolved. I think it will continue to evolve, but that just speaks to the work of unlearning and learning and continue to be in the pursuit of learning. So that's where I'm at right now. July 7th, 2001. I'm not sure if that'll be maybe a year or two from now.
No, I hear that. So you grew up in Washington Heights?
Washington Heights, not the musical version.
Okay, that's what's up. My roommate, he's Dominicano, so he's from Washington Heights. So shout out to my Dominicanas and the Dominicanos. So
Shout out to
much-
my Dominican brothers and sisters.
yes, so much
You know,
love.
that's where I'm from. And shout out to my culture that really nourished and sustained me in all my magic.
Yes, yes. So we know that COVID-19 has made things difficult for many of us, especially educators, over the
Man,
past almost 2 years now at this point. So what I'm interested in knowing from you is, in what ways has COVID-19 transformed you as an educator, a mother, and a wife?
talk about unlearning.
Mm, yes, talk about
I
that.
think I think that is the theme, right? Like how we're interconnected and the responsibility that we have to each other to keep each other safe and to also rethink and reimagine the ways in which we think about our structures, whether it's structures of schooling, structures of mothering, structures in partnership, like all these types of structures. It was kind of like a blowing up of the system, so to speak. So for me, the theme is like it catapulted me to unlearn. Like, how was I managing? How was I balancing? How was I my decision making? Like, it was
Mhm.
really hard to be a full-time employee while also having my kids here remote. And for my son, it was a lot easier. You know, he's 14, he's more self-sufficient, while my daughter at the time being 6 years old at classes where she had live and I had meetings, my husband, and we it was just a lot of trying to figure out the balance, right? While
Yeah,
also trying to quiet down the worries. Our family safe, keeping the world safe, because it was about how our decisions were interconnected, right? It's not just about my decisions, but it also was about like my neighbor's decisions or, the decisions of the folks in my neighborhood or even my outside family and friends. I think the beautiful thing about that is that it was such a beautiful reset. It allowed me to think beyond the scope and the ceilings that I had for myself. It allowed me to really think about my platform differently. It allowed me to really think about my voice and my power and what I was going through. And I don't know, I feel like it was almost a divine reset of a way for me to reimagine all the possibilities for myself as a mother, as an educator, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter, as a friend, just like how was I going to connect with folks now? How was I going to build relationships virtually? How was I going to support schools and communities virtually? How was I going to translate all that I am in person now through technology? Right? I had to unlearn a lot of things. I had to learn how to use platforms to do those things. So I think it was just a lot. I have to say that some things were stormy, but after the storm comes a beautiful rainbow. And I think that the rainbow for me was it took a lot of unlearning to learn, and I'm learning to really be grounded in the ways in which I think about relationship building, the ways that I think about support, the ways that I think about being a humanitarian in this world without having human connection, which is like, how does that happen? So, yeah, I think that for me, it was just a beautiful reset to say, okay, if the universe is asking me to sit down, what am I going to learn from this? And I really had to sit in that learning chair, and I'm still sitting in that learning chair as we speak.
and you mentioned just the ability to connect with people virtually.
Ooh,
I think that's been the greatest gift that I've
yes,
received throughout this whole
man.
COVID-19. pandemic is the fact that I've gained so many friends,
Family, brother.
family,
Family.
community.
Family that has chosen us, that
Right.
ride for us, that support us in ways that sometimes even the people that are family have not. Like that, wow. Like, yes, exactly that.
And what's amazing is when you are in the space of solitude where you have no choice but to reflect,
Hmm,
no choice but to assess
come
everything
on.
that you've done, whether it's in the classroom, like I was in the classroom for many years, and you know how it is. When you're in that space, everything's going 150 miles per hour. You're making rapid fire decisions about
Ooh,
lesson plans, about grading. Even your prep time is devoted to making copies and doing other menial jobs. You don't have a chance to sit down and just really think about what it is you're doing. So COVID-19, more than anything, allowed me to really reflect on 15 years in the classroom, honestly, from the beginning up until now, and really just taking the time to assess, well, why did I make that decision? Why did I
mm,
stay in this building as long as I did, knowing
mm,
that I wasn't being treated right? Right? Why was I engaging in practices that continued to reinforce white supremacist norms,
ooh,
right? Like, why
talk
was
about
I
it.
doing these things subconsciously,
Mm,
right? And I think what was great about being able to connect with people virtually, particularly in the teacher grant space on IG, is that they help me to unlearn.
that
So,
part.
so being able to connect with brothers and sisters like yourself, like Rakim, like Shivy, like Deidre, and I can
Yes.
name so many
Dr.
people.
Jones, Dr.
Like
Kate, like
and
Dr.
all these
Yaba for me, man.
all these people, they helped me to become a better educator because, and I tell people this all the time, I have not been in the classroom for 2 years. So just being able to see how people have been struggling and being able to be in a position where I can actually reinvent myself so that
Hmm.
when I do get back in the classroom, I'm going to be just a totally different person. So I want to know your thoughts about your own experience in that teacher gram space because we know what the pros are, but we also know what the cons are as well. In particular, some of the racist gatekeeping that takes place where
Come on.
folks like ourselves don't get access to certain spaces. You know, we're not welcome because of our morals and principles and how we align with each other. So give me your thoughts about how the space has been for you on a personal level, but also some of the gatekeeping tactics that you've either experienced or have witnessed during your time.
So for me, it honestly has been a beautiful experience. It's so interesting that you're like teacher influencer, the teacher gram. Like, I'm like, I didn't really see myself in that space. I just literally saw myself as a Black woman. I have an IG. I'm an educator. My identities are multifaceted. So I'm going to use my platform to just do that and show that. But I think that this year I really wanted to. The first thing I did actually with my platform is I said, I want to kind of like restructure what this is, right? I really wanted, like, I feel like my fire is burning in education. I just looked at it sort of like as a creative space for me to not only show who I was, but to also highlight that part of my identity. While I'm all of these things, I really wanted to just highlight that part of my identity as an educator. And it's so interesting because, when I felt like I answered that call, like I felt like I had all of those thoughts for a long time, I feel like the universe, God, the ancestors just started rewarding me. I was able to talk to Deidre. We were able to have like a clubhouse. I was able to go on lives with Raquel. Like it just all started to happen. And it wasn't this thing that I really sort of like planned or like really thought about it intentionally, but it really just happened organically. And I really just started to connect with folks that were just brilliant and genius and really had me reflecting on a day-to-day basis. I'm a very reflective person, so I'm constantly thinking about how I'm growing, what I'm learning, what I need to question. So for me, it's just been a beautiful space to connect with brothers and sisters, Rakim, Dr. Jones, Deidre, just so many beautiful people, you know, the dancer teacher, Jordy, like so many beautiful people in community. I can name more and more and more and more and more. And I'm sorry if I missed you. Y'all know I love us. I love y'all.
Yes.
But it's just been a beautiful space for me to just center the power in my voice, understanding that we have power in our authorship. Something that I learned from Dr. Goldie Muhammad's text is that we have to be the gatekeepers of our story. So I'm not too worried about who's gatekeeping white supremacy. I'm sort of gatekeeping about how am I going to be the counter story? How am I
Mhm.
going to show up against it? How am I going to use my platform to have people think? Like, that's why my live brunch Sunday started on Instagram, because I thought about, like, are y'all ready for this talk? Like, are we really going to talk about this? Like, let's talk, let's share in perspective. A number of years ago, I was able to I had the honor and privilege of going to a Courageous Conversation National Summit, Glenn Singleton's
Yep.
company. And what I learned about that is the beauty of perspective and the beauty of our stories and the beauty of talking about these things that are often kept silent. And we know that silence is violence and will continue to perpetuate these systems, right? So that's really sort of how I feel about this teacher Graham, teacher influencer. I hear you, I take it. But for me, it's more about the us and the we. Like, how do our stories get us closer to liberation? How do our stories, how does my work get us closer to freedom? You know, Bell Hooks talks about love in a way that she says is about our commitment to our spiritual growth and
Yeah.
each other's growth, right? So, how am I doing that as a vessel in this world? Not just through my teacher Graham, not just through these social platforms, but in my everyday decisions as an educator in my job position, as my everyday decisions as a wife and mother, in my everyday decisions as a friend. It was so beautiful. I feel like I'm forever changed after my conversation with Dr. Yaba for my live brunch Sundays, where she says, we're always deciding. It is always a decision. And for me now, I that resonates with me every day. How am I always deciding to be in a pathway of liberation, of freedom, of decolonizing our minds and our hearts from the ways that we've been indoctrinated that really have caused us to self-hate, to not realize our power, to not realize our magic. So in tandem, I'm finding my own magic and my own genius through my platform that's allowing me to stand in my power and sharing in my voice.
And that's just beautiful, because I know that when I first connected with you, you were still trying to figure things out. You were
Yes, I
kind of
was.
you were in this place where, wow, like I really want to do this.
Yes.
I really want to do this. I really want to do that. And then
And I
maybe,
saw what was possible because of y'all.
yes.
Like you were out here doing conferences, like Deidre was doing all these lives, so was Rakim. Like I was literally figuring out through those of y'all. Like I call Dr. Jones a trailblazer. I call y'all trailblazers and the people that I'm literally walking the path that you guys have started. And yes, like I was literally figuring out, I was nervous as heck. I'm like, I don't really know. Like, I don't know if this is like how it's going to be received, but those are all the things, all the lies that we've been indoctrinated to believe, and also fear of not being enough, of not being smart enough, of saying the right things, doing the right things. And I'm like, those are all tenets of white supremacy culture. And if I'm really wanting to make the choice every single day to fight and dismantle it, it starts with fighting and dismantling it within myself first. Like that's the work.
Right.
So I feel like yes, like it's really pushed me to do that.
And you mentioned that you're not really a fan of the teacher influencer term. I'm not a fan of it neither. I mean, quite frankly, but I've come to a point where I've embraced it because I understand the influence that I'm having on people, like to the point where people then expect you to say something every time something pops off. That's why I try to shy away from that title, because when you become a quote unquote celebrity, now all of a sudden when things pop off, you're expected to be that person. And I think Blair Imani, she did a live maybe a month ago talking about this issue. So for those who aren't familiar with Blair Imani, she does a Smarter in Seconds series on her platform. She is awesome. Make sure y'all follow her. But
I need to check her out.
oh yeah, you gotta check her out. And she actually has a book coming out based on her Smarter in Seconds series. So she talks about a lot of LGBTQ plus issues, but she's also a Muslim as well. So there's a lot of intersectional issues that she focuses on her content, but she's amazing. You definitely have to follow her.
I definitely do.
Yes. But the one thing that I've noticed is when you put things out, people listen. Like people really listen, and people will DM you and say, wow, like what you told me really hit home. Like, I thank you. And if I'm able to do that for 1, 2, 3 people, it's worth it. It's worth
Absolutely.
it. And quite frankly, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just feel like, yeah, like I feel like even with the work that I'm doing, it's like healing out loud. And I don't know where I heard this from, but there's a term like hurt people,
Yes.
but it's about rethinking about like healing people, heal people.
Right.
Right? So as I am healing, the process of healing is also helping others in their process of healing. So I take, and I appreciate you saying that, brother, like I take the work that I put out or whatever lives it is, like really intentional about the process of healing for us, for myself, but also for us. Like, how can my story help us? How can having different conversations or topics help us towards this path? So, yeah, like this work or whatever this is, right? Whatever God, the universe, the ancestors is, whatever I'm answering, I'm hoping that is that call. That because I'm doing this to heal myself, that my stories can help or that our stories can help, because it's not just about me, it's about us. Like my platform, I always say like this is not I, this is we. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's like teacher healing. Not like teacher influencing, but like it's a teaching healing community. And that's really just how I see us, because I'm just like in a year, I feel like I'm even just so much different than I was, a year ago. And it's because of this beautiful community that's helping me stay grounded and committed to this healing work.
And that's the beautiful thing about this space, is that it forces you to come out of your shell. It really forces
Mm.
you to push the envelope and put yourself in positions that are just very uncomfortable. But you know what? We got to push through that discomfort in order to get to our destinations, right?
That part.
So, can we talk about Black women for a second? Because there's so much going on
I'm ready.
about Black women. I know you want to talk about some Black women. I know I want to talk about some sisters. So, we've had a lot going on. Sha'Carri Richardson
Hmm.
not being able to compete in the Olympics in the 100 meters. That's been well documented. But then just yesterday, we hear that Nicole Hannah-Jones turns down tenure at UNC to take on
Period.
a chair position at Howard.
Come on.
You want to talk about power? Ooh. But
She said thank you, but I'm taking my talents elsewhere.
and that's just
What a
doing,
model, what a model for us to
yeah.
really think about and reflect on, right? How this genius, brilliant sister, having fought, met all of the qualifications, right? Having had her colleagues before her, received tenure, never being denied, all of them before her being white, right? And here comes this powerful Black woman that is doing just such amazing work for the world, right? And she goes through this, and she didn't have to, but it is just such a beautiful story that she was able to take control of her intellectual property, of her being able to thrive in a space and not survive in a space, where she talks about not staying in a space that was not built for us, but going to a space that was. So for me, it just, man, like, I'm so inspired by her work and her conviction, and just her living out loud in her beautiful Blackness, in her wanting to thrive, in her understanding her genius and in her magic. And I hope that's a way for us, all Black women, having all of these accolades or all of these awards, but Black women all over the world, Black women in every zip code, Black women
Whole
are
diaspora.
self-actualizing in different ways,
Yeah.
where it's not a degree, or it's not a status thing. I want us to really stand in whatever power we have, and to understand that we hold that power and we can thrive once we understand it. And I think that just for me, like, I think about that also when I think about what are the choices that I'm going to make every day to be closer to like what the Hannah Jones is showing us, the possibilities. And it's also connected to like liberation and freedom, being beholden to the conditioning, to this white gaze at times that we have, to wanting to assimilate, and how we can sort of like break those chains. I think about, I assimilated my name for 33 years. Everyone called me Yaribel. I still have friends that call me that name because I went so long with that name, because I never corrected anyone. And I was ashamed. I was ashamed of my name. I didn't want anything to do with my name. It was too ethnic. It was too Dominican, like, ill,
Let's not start. Let's not start talking about that. I mean, come on.
Yes,
Look at this name. Look, come
I
on.
know that's right. So,
I have
it's
my
like,
struggles with this one.
so it's like even the pain in that of owning, right? The first thing that's given to us, and how I didn't want to have no ownership to that. Somebody else owned me. So for me, it's like all the decisions that I'm currently making towards freedom, and how a sister like, Dr. Nicole Hannah Jones is just showing us and modeling for us, and doing it out loud and unapologetically, like, yes. So I'm just proud to be in the community of Black women. I think we are just so special, so gifted, so amazing. And I just wish for us, because I'm still working on it, that really we believe in our gifts, and we believe in our genius, and we believe in our magic. It's a day-to-day process for me. Sometimes I can show it, but I have thoughts, and I have to work through my thoughts, because I've been indoctrinated so heavily. Dr. Yaba told us, like, we're so deep in the water, like, that sometimes even without knowing it, like, she called me in and was like, sis, why are you doing that? Why are you having those type of conversations with your son? Like, it don't matter what you say. And I realized then, like, man, I'm still doing things in ways that are beholden of the ways that I've been indoctrinated. I reflect every day. I think every day, and it's literally a daily choice of how I'm going to believe, stand in my power.
But that's all of us. That's
All
all
of
of us.
us.
The minute we step into this world,
Come on.
we are in the waters of whiteness. We
Come
know
on.
that, right? So all these things that we feel are defaults are the things that we have to unlearn. But I want to focus on this for a sec, because we so often focus on Black boys, how we need to, build a self-efficacy, how we need to speak life into them, and all of which is true. We do need to focus on Black boys, but I also feel like we have to give that same type of energy to our young Black girls, our Black queens, because
Absolutely.
who knows? I don't know what everybody's home situation is, but there's some who don't grow up, with the father saying that to them. So they don't know what it's like to be loved by a male figure, right? And to have that affection. And that has some long-term effects as they get older. Just like with the brother who is growing up and they don't have a father in their life. There's certain things about learning how to be a man that you're not going to know because you didn't have that influence back when you were younger. So talking about Black girls, they have been criminalized in our schools for a long time. We're aware about the adultification bias that goes on, the hypersexualization, the inherent racism in dress code. All these things have been prevalent in our schools. So what I'm wondering, as a Black woman who has experienced some of this, I want to know, why is it that we don't center that enough in our own spaces as Black people? How come we don't have these conversations? How come we don't unpack that amongst each other? And then also, what can be done to decriminalize our young Black queens in schools? Because it's still going on, especially now.
Man, that's a heavy question. When I think about that, or even you mentioning like family structures, or, we know that even in two-parent households where the medium income is high, like disproportionately, the system is always going to be designed the way it was intended. So those same outcomes and those same results still happen. And I think that for me, part of the work and education is about like, we don't prioritize it, if we don't name it, then we can't, as my sis Matea says, like, you got a name to tame. If we don't name those things and in a systemic level, because then we get into this idea of like individualizing like Black girls and family structures, and then we start to blame those things, right? So then it becomes a facing of family structures and what they didn't have and what they need, right? But we need to understand that systemically, the system is already doing what it's intended to do with Black boys and Black girls, right? There is a systemic issue, policy, structure, and the ways we think about discipline for our Black babies, right? There will be no trying to really think about restructuring or what are racist policies, structures, and systems currently working to have this happen. And what do we need to do as a collective, in education, to really think about the ways in which we can end this disproportionality. So I think that for us, it's a systemic, it's an institutional issue. I can think about growing up in my family household, how that was. Wait, there's some things that we have to unlearn here, because I'm doing it then on an individual level while she's experiencing institutional and systemic level in school. So I think that, and if I can share a resource, I would say Dr. Monique Morris is someone currently reading, she's the
Push out.
author of Push Out. I know that you're going to ask me about this, but a book that I'm currently reading is Sing a Rhythm, Dance a Blues. I have so much to read, but I decided to read that one because in the process of me trying to acquire this doctoral program, I also want to heal through this process. And really that book is about like the liberation of Black and brown girls. So how is this process even going to be liberatory for me? And what am I going to learn through this amazing scholar that's already telling us about this work? So for me, there's a lot still that I'm learning. There's a lot still that I need to know. But I realize that in the decisions and the way that I show up, whether it's as a parent or whether it's in the institution, I have to name the things. I have to say, this is what is happening. How can we undo this? What are some ways in which we can investigate these racist policies to ensure that this doesn't happen to our Black girls, to ensure that we rethink the ways in which we think about their genius and their magic? Everybody was, yassing, right? But there are a bunch of Shakaris in our classroom with the nails and the hair and the swag and just that girl and out loud that often get policed for being too loud. I was one of those girls that often talk, that got like, she talks too much in class. I have a
For
lot to
real?
say. I have a lot to say. That should be embraced. That should be cultivated. Students should be able to critique. Students should be able to speak out loud and be authentic without being policed or over sexualized or misperceived to be violent or to be disrespectful or to be all of these things, right? If we're not conforming to norm standards, which we know are entrenched in whiteness and white supremacy culture.
And speaking of standards and just programs, I know that you've done some commentary and written some things about educational leadership programs, right? I know that you just wrote a whole publication around the need for anti-racist solidarity, not just within our schools, but being able to teach our future educational administrators how to engage in that kind of leadership, because that's something that is lacking in too many of our schools. I mean, and for those who are interested in adding some literature to their list, I'm actually going to go ahead and just share your publication, which you wrote with your professor that you had in Columbia.
Shout out to Dr. Yaribel. She is a sister and a partner in this work. Part of this was, and you started off with this question, like, what got you into education? Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of it is influenced by saviorism and the ways in which we have been indoctrinated to think about teaching and learning, right? As a fixing, as a way to save. And through a lot of the decolonizing of my mind, through a lot of the self-actualizing that happened through my graduate program, I realized that all of those things were really stripping my humanity and the ways in which I stripped even my kiddos of their humanity while I was in the classroom, because it was entrenched in anti-Blackness. I came from a teacher training program where we used Teach Like a Champion, understanding that our students were already champions. When it was about behavior management and managing and protocols and having students be and act and just be a certain way, and this idea of me being a savior and being the person to teach and all of these things. So for me, this work was really about calling myself in, and calling us in, and how we need one mic and really investigating our internal anti-Blackness, whether it's individual. For me, it's also institutional. I'm an educator, so I'm complicit in many ways, but it's about really examining like our teacher training programs and our preparation programs that often center accountability measures and standardized education. We've known those things to be the thing. That doesn't mean that we have to continue to center those things when we know that they continue to fail our students. Part of this publication, part of this writing was to really call myself in and to understand the responsibility that I have, someone in education, as someone that works to support community stakeholders. It's really a way for me to hold myself accountable in the ways in which I'm going to show up into the role and the way that I'm going to call folks into that solidarity. So, I appreciate you, brother, sharing my work. I'm really thinking about my work now very intentionally, and also thinking about how it's so closely connected even to the work that I still need to do.
Mm. So in many ways, it's a reflective piece for yourself.
Absolutely.
Where you're checking yourself to say, okay, I still gotta fill up these gaps.
Absolutely.
In my own learning.
Absolutely.
So I want to know this because I've never been an administrator. Being a principal is hard. I acknowledge that. And I know that over the years, I've given my principal hell. I know that, because like, how can you making this decision? How can you making that decision? And then you realize, oh, you got to do, there's certain mandates that are being handed down by the district that you have to do. That's non-negotiable. But, you don't realize that in the moment. So here's the bottom line. There are going to be certain principles assistant principals who will not be intrinsically motivated to want to build a capacity when we talk about anti-racism. That's just a fact. So if we have these principal preparation programs, what I'm wondering is what accountability measures have to be put in place to ensure that they are engaging with this work, because it's a non-negotiable in our opinion. It has to happen, but we know that there are certain people who in their heart don't really want to do it.
I think so. That question is like, man, I'm reflecting on it as we speak, but I also even think that we need to think about unlearning what accountability measures are. For me, the calling in wasn't the accountability measures, right? The power was in the relationships that I built with my professors. The power was in the understanding of the power of self, right? Like I feel like the transformation for me happened when I centered my identity, when I had racialized conversations constantly about the work, when I thought about the implications versus my intent as part of this work. I think that oftentimes we think about accountability measures as consequences or punishment or
Like
these
punitive.
things. And and I'm not, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I also want to be clear that for me, the accountability was in community. The accountability was in understanding that the power was in the relationships. Like for me, my professors really saved my life because they called me in. They asked for me to think about my identity and how that was impactful to me as an educator, for me to understand theory that centers systemic, institutional, and individual racism, for me to understand how important ethnic studies is to the work and to centering it, being a leader, to be culturally responsive. And that was the accountability. And while I was doing that work, I was also doing my own self-work, asking myself the questions, wanting to know more even about the country where my parents immigrated from. Why were the thoughts that I was having the thoughts that I was having? And then how that also translated into my saviorism when I became an educator. So I think that part of the work is how we think about language, and the ways in which I think about accountability was more about community and relationships, and the ways in which I was called in and nurtured in the process of my self-actualization. Like the person that I am today is not because of me. A part of the work, yes, because I am who I am,
Right.
but most of the work is the we. My grandmother, my mother, my aunts, my uncles, my dad, my family, my professors, community, my friends. That's the accountability. That's how I see for us. My sis, Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, she says like this work starts with the self and the
Archaeology of the self.
archaeology.
Yep.
We
Come
gotta we
on.
gotta dig deep. We gotta
Deep
find them
excavation.
bones.
Come on.
We gotta find them bones, but the bones we're not gonna find in somebody else's grave. We're gonna find them in ours. We have to do the deep digging, and that's the accountability that it was for me. My professors, my family, the people gave me the tools, they gave me the shovel, they gave me the rake. They were the seeds at times for me to be planted. And I just feel like I'm just continuing to be a product of that. And that's the accountability for me. And I hope to be that accountability for those in which I work alongside. Like I'm not forcing myself on anyone, but I am modeling the ways in which I see humanity in the work. I model what I want to see for our children when I work with teachers or district or community stakeholders. I take pride in that because that is the power. The power is not in we have to meet X, Y, and Z. Yeah, those things are those things. But also, if we have solidarity in this, if we have one mic, we're going to be so much powerful to use whatever it is to get to the path. So that for me is the accountability.
Right. And when you talk about the calling in, it's almost as if you're alluding to a restorative approach
Oh,
to
absolutely.
leadership, because we talk about this so often in the context of our children, instead of suspending them or giving them in school suspension where they're staring at a wall, no pictures, like for 4, 6, 8 hours. That's not productive. Let's have a conversation. Let's get to the root of what's going on. And I think if we model that with our future principals, we're providing them with a template, a foundation for how
Absolutely.
they need to do it with their staff, with
That's what my
their student
professors
body.
did for me. That's what my
Right.
professors did for me. So I am literally a product and a model of the ways in which they nourished and taught and held the environment. Like that's literally, I'm trying to use the model of Dr. Celie Ruiz, of Dr. Gooden, of Dr. Soribel, of Dr. Terrence Green, like Sling, of Dr. Feller, like all of these beautiful Black professors really said, I see you, I hear you, I value you, you are brilliant, without even having to say it, by
Mm.
modeling it, by showing it, and by really cultivating the brilliance that was within. I hope to be that in whatever space that I'm in, because I had that myself and I'm just such a different person than I was 3 years ago. I hope to be a different person 3 years from now and 3 other years after that. And then I hope that as I'm also changing and evolving, that the people around me and the system around me is also changing and evolving. It's again, and restorative. I think about Ubuntu. I think about our interconnectedness. I think about our
Yes.
interrelatedness, and I am because you are. And that is really true in the ways in which I think about this work and the ways I think that work was for them. They realized that responsibility that they had to us, because that meant the responsibility that they had to themselves. So that's really the ways in which I see this work.
So this leads me to my last question before we get to the lightning round.
Okay, okay.
We mentioned the one mic concept. That's
Mm.
the goal. That's the destination we're trying to get to. What I want to know is, without giving away the obvious answers to this question, but really thinking deeply about this, what do you believe personally are the current barriers that prevent us from having the one mic? And I'm only asking this because just within our community, you have Black liberals fighting against Black conservatives. You have moderates who are fighting against liberals. You have all these political conflicts happening, and there are times where we're just not agreeing with each other. We're not seeing eye to eye ideologically. So how can we get to a place where it's all about that one mic
I
and
think
we're
what's
all on code?
to be honest with you, I think what's keeping us is the water, right? Like we don't
Ooh.
give enough truth to the fact that we've been indoctrinated and we have to unlearn. Like we
Mhm.
are beholden to the status quo. And the status quo is individualistic. The status quo is not thinking about the collective. The status quo is not thinking Ubuntu and my responsibility to you and to the world and to the universe. The status quo has us thinking about hierarchy. How am I going to benefit from this? How is this going to elevate my status? Or how do I reach this proximity to whatever it is that we're trying to attain and walk towards? So I feel like that's what's keeping us from truly walking in the path of liberation,
Mhm.
is not understanding that it's a collective liberation, that my liberation is rooted in your liberation, is rooted in your liberation, and that we have a responsibility to each other and to ourselves. But because we're so beholden to our ideals, our motives, our wants, our needs, our individualistic ways of thinking, that I have to say, I have to disrupt myself. That's what fear does. And that's what the water does. We're swimming in it. Dr. Yaba
Yes,
said,
we
like,
are.
we're swimming deep. It's about how can we help each other to be life vest so that we can all be able to swim and be free and just, I know that, as Dr. Yaba said about me, a little flowery, But that's the ways in which I think about it. Like, it is flowery, but I just think that we need to remove our own sort of ways in which we're thinking about fighting for what we want in an individualistic way. Like,
Mm,
yes, I have to fight for my self preservation. That's a totally different conversation. But in terms of this work is collective, and
yes.
this work is stronger in solidarity. We know that there's power in that, right? So yeah, that's just what's coming up for me when you say that, is that we're just beholden to the ways in which we've been indoctrinated, and we still have a lot of unlearning to do and a lot of digging to do in terms of why we make the decisions that we make on a daily basis that are individualistic and not about the collective or collectivism, or about even the mindset of social, moral, racial
Yeah.
justice for all of us.
Yep. Absolutely. It's all about the sum of the parts.
Come on.
It's all about the sum of the parts. We got to focus on the sum.
That's right.
That's what it's about. All right. So we are at the hour. So I want to get to our lightning round.
Okay.
And these are quick hitters. So it'll give people a chance to get to know you a little bit, outside of this liberation space and all the freedom fighting that you're doing in your end. So how do you exercise self-care? Because you're doing a lot. I mean, you just completed a program. You're trying to get into a doctoral program. You're a mother.
I'm in
You
it,
are a
brother.
wife.
I'm in it, brother.
I
I'm
mean,
in it deep.
like, how do you exercise self-care with all of what you're doing?
So for me, self care has been two things. One is sistership,
Mm,
like my friends, my best friends, my sisters, my community that holds me, that nurture me, that talk to me, that when I call them in, they allow me to share in depths of my thoughts and my fears and my accomplishments and all that is of me. I've realized friendships, sistership is really something that, man, it really sustains me in this work. So that's part of the self-care. My sisters that really like holds me when this world tries to destroy me. And another thing is, I want to say like writing, journaling. I write gratitude because Oprah's book about gratitude really changed my life after my dad passed away 7 years ago, because I was really in a dark space and I realized that I had to have a hard reset about my life, and I had to really center all of the amazing things that were happening to me, with me, around me. So sometimes I write in gratitude of things that have happened, and sometimes I write in gratitude of things I want to manifest. And I have to say that a lot of the things that I have written have truly come to fruition, and it's just the universe rewarding me, the ancestors, God rewarding me, and just continuing to do that and just continuing to listen. I write of gratitude, I write my thoughts, I write when I have creative ideas, because I know that that's not coming from me, that's coming from like a divine place. And so every
come
time I write, I'm like, I get almost like nervous and excited because I'm like, oh my God, this is going to happen. So I really have to like be intentional about what I'm going to say. And it just flows. It really just flows. So my sistership and just like the power of my words really are part of my self-care.
Wow. So manifesting and projecting.
Oh, come on. Get that on a
Mm,
t-shirt.
that should be a shirt, right? But you mentioned gratitude journal. That's funny because my wife talked to me about this the other day. She said, "Baby, you gotta do a gratitude journal.
Come on.
You just gotta write it down. We
Hmm.
can't focus on what we don't have. We just gotta focus on what we are destined to have." You know,
Oh, come on, wife.
So yeah, me
See,
being
black
me
women be
being
knowing. That's
man.
what I'm
They be
saying. You gotta
knowing.
listen to black women.
They be
Period.
knowing. They be knowing.
So my brother,
So
that maybe that's the call in, and maybe that's divine alignment. Like, you gotta write. I mean, you already write, but in a way of gratitude, all the things that are and all the things that will be.
yeah, I might have to take heed to my wife's advice because you are not the first person who's mentioned gratitude journal in my presence. So the fact
Ooh,
that it keeps on coming up,
come on.
that's a sign from the man upstairs. He let me know, like, okay, you got to do
Period.
some work, my brother. You got to get some work done.
Period.
All right. So you're at the dinner table. You can invite 3 people to dinner, dead or alive. Who are they going to be?
Ooh. See, initially I mentioned, my dad passed away, my grandma passed away, a month today. And then my aunt that helped raise me passed away. And I'm a little selfish. I'm like, man, I should answer that question and say them so that I can just say everything that I wanted to say that was left unsaid. But I think that even though I didn't say those things, I hope that they felt those things I didn't say. I want to honor them in that question because I feel like I think about them when I think about, time with somebody that has passed, about people that were part of my village that helped me to be who I am. But as far as like influential people, and I think this sort of talks to like my identity. I think about Celia Cruz, I think about Biggie Smalls, and I think
Mm,
about Oprah. Celia Cruz, music and just her being a black woman, cubana, salsera. I love salsa. Salsa is one of my favorite genres of music.
nah.
And even her song, La Negra Tiene Tumbao, like just
Mm,
like in her blackness and out loud and just beautiful and her voice and just man, I would just love to just talk with her about her experience, not being able to go back to her motherland and just being this influential for the world. Her home place was not a place that was welcoming for her. So, her, I think she's the GOAT. Biggie Smalls, I think about myself as a writer. He was such an amazing, brilliant writer. And I sort of think about like asking him, like, who cultivated that sort of gift? Just his
mm,
spoken word and just to be in his presence and in his magic and just in all that he was. And then I think Oprah, she is my auntie in my head forever. Used to watch her talk show since her book saved my life. I feel like one day I will share space and energy with her in some capacity. And I just feel like 7 years ago I was really in a dark place, and her book that I have here, What I Know for Sure, really allowed me to think about what I knew for sure. Like even in the
mm.
back it says, I know for sure your journey begins with a choice to get up, step out, and live fully. When I chose to read this book, I was in a really dark place. And this is what catapulted me to start journaling, to start really thinking about my life in different ways. It's what had me thinking about going back to school. When I went to Columbia, it was 10 years after the fact. I had been in any classroom as far as me being the learner. So I feel like this book really was transformational for me. And there's a lot of things that I sort of think I know for sure, but I'm still learning and unlearning. So it definitely grounds me. But those would be my 3 people. And I think it also speaks to just like the multifacetedness of all that encompassed me and my identity. Being somebody that's from New York, from Washington Heights, Dominicana, and also, a New Yorker, which that in and of itself, it's a different state of mind. So those would be my 3.
Yes, it is. You're just channeling some Nas right now. You talking about New York state of mind. You talking about one mic, and then you
Oh, come
throwing,
on.
Nas. That's
That shout out to my sis, Dr. Soribel. Every time that she writes or publishes something, she always adds hip hop to it. So
yeah,
she's like, in everything that I write, I connect it to part of those that influenced me. So shout out to her.
yeah. Got to keep the culture at the hip. Got to keep it at the hip.
Period.
Yes. All right. Last question. Who would you like to see on the podcast? And before you answer the question, it's got to be somebody they have to help me get on here.
Oh, you know what's crazy? When I thought about this question, and I don't know if he's been on, and I don't think it would be hard for you to get.
Who?
But Liberation Lab, Bobby, has he been on the platform?
Wow. I just had Bobby.
You
I just had
did.
Bobby, but he's gonna come out soon. Yeah, I
So
had Bobby.
first of all, Bobby is a brilliant brother,
Yeah.
from his recaps, from his connecting us with movies, Disney, like even his recaps. I just feel like community is just so genius. So for me, it's just like amplify the voices of our community.
Yeah.
Whether it's Liberation Lab, whether it's Matea Ashley, whether it's the dancer teacher, whether it's like, I'm just going to give you names
There's a
and
lot of
names and
people.
names. There's just so many genius and brilliant folks in this teacher healing space, and we should amplify and nourish their voices, because at times we think about like, who are the people with the things,
Come
right?
on.
Not
Yeah.
understanding that we are the people with the things. So I would say all of those folks, if I can.
That's crazy because pretty much all those people you mentioned are on the guest wish list. Like these are all people
Okay,
who I'm working my way through. I am
come
working my
on,
way through.
y'all.
So like these are folks who at some point are gonna be in this space, but you can't get all of them on at the same time. Everybody deserves their own time where they can just unpack their story and then just have that spotlight. And that's what
Come
this
on.
this platform is all about. But thank you for even mentioning the fact that we just gotta support each other. And it's not about the followers, it's not about the likes, it's not about the comments, right? It's about the body of work, the receipts. What are they doing? Because
Come
there's
on.
some dope, because some of the dopest people in our space, they may have maybe 300 followers, but we will never
Absolutely.
know how dope we are, how dope they are, because we so focused on metrics.
Come on.
We so focused on these metrics, like, and we got to get out of that. So I appreciate you for even
Yeah,
naming
and
that.
I reflect on that too. So that's something that I call myself in at times as well.
Right. Let people know how they can connect with you and tell them about your series. You have your own talk series too, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
thank you, brother. It's just a healing space for me that I felt like I wanted to do. And it's so crazy because as an undergrad, my major was broadcasting and English with a minor in Black studies. And I feel like it's just all coming into fruition. All of what was sort of like developing this 18-year-old of wanting to be all of these things. I'm sort of like, it's a funny way that I talk to God and say like, okay, I see what you're doing. So Live Brunch Sundays I host on Instagram is a space where I have mostly amplified the voices of Black women. And yeah, I could find that on my Instagram at Jari, Yari.Mercedes. Oftentimes post my thoughts, or sometimes I just post myself in my authenticity if I'm out with my friends, family, whomever. My platform is the ways in which encompasses all the multifacets of my identity. But that's where you can find me. And on Sundays, we always hold space for community. And we've had a couple of episodes already, from Dr. Celie Ruiz to Dr. Muhammad to Dr. Jones to Dr. Yaba Blay, whose interview I'm still, man, it's still so reflecting in my heart. So, but so many more to come, so many a community that I need to pull in, because there is brilliance and genius amongst all of us. So soon come, I'm trying to balance this with this doctoral program that's already fast and furious. And I just, prayers are welcome. Send me your positive vibes as I work through continuing this pathway of being the best version of myself, so that I can really be accountable to myself and to us, and really being grounded and cementing in love, and the ways in which I love me and the ways in which I love us. So yeah, that's where y'all can find me, and this is what y'all gonna get.
Well, Queen, I appreciate you for coming on the platform.
You
This has
brother.
just been a great conversation. And speaking about our Black women in this space, let's make it a habit, y'all, to make sure that we show love to the free game that is being disseminated.
Come.
All right. So if you go on Jari's page, you will see her Cash App.
Oh,
So
thank you, brother.
whenever you go on to her page or whenever you're watching one of the live brunches, let's show our sisters some love, all right?
Thank
Because
you, brother.
this is gold. This
Thank you,
is
brother.
sacred knowledge that she is dishing out with all the guests that she's had on, most of whom have been on this podcast. So I know that it's just been it's game that we all
Thank you,
need to
brother.
have. So
Thank you, brother.
thank
Thank
you.
you, brother. Thank you, brother, for saying that. But I also see it as paying it forward. You know, so many have done it for me, so my responsibility is to do it for others. That's true solidarity.
No,
So I
and
appreciate that, and I love y'all. If you know, if y'all want to do that, it's not necessary because, you know, I understand the walk that I have, and it's a way for me to pay it forward because so many have done it for me.
I
So
hear you, but I just wanted to name that because
I know, brother. I
I just wanted to
appreciate
name
it.
that, because I gotta support my sisters now.
Thank
And
you so
you so
much.
humble. You're not gonna say that for yourself. So
Well, thank you so much, brother, for sharing me on your platform. I look forward to more genius to come out from you, more words, more books. I'm hoping to continue to walk in this teacher healing alongside you and community. And hopefully, the path that you all are creating, I will also be creating a pathway for others that are coming alongside me. So I appreciate you so much for having me. I appreciate you so much for amplifying my voice. And I can't wait for us to continue to collaborate in this teacher healing community.
absolutely. And correction, you are already creating that path. You are already doing it. You already
Ashe.
doing it. Ashe. All right. Thank you, sister. Love you.
Thank you, brother. Love you too.
All right.
Peace, y'all. Love y'all.
All right. All right, y'all. So here we have it. Another episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. I thank you all for tuning in. And as always, I wish you all a good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.